is a video tutorial on how to make bread. So this is 500 grams of flour. I am using this large bag of all-purpose plain flour. You can use an alternative strong white bread flour like this, but I choose not to use the bread flour because I actually prefer this flour, which we had a discussion the other day about this. So 500 grams of flour. Then this is our yeast. This is 7 grams of active yeast, it's called. So you can buy it in packets like this, or you can buy this Allinson's brand. Seems to be quite a common one that you find. So they do packets of yeast, 7 grams already weighed out. I bought large quantities from a shady guy on the internet, which is why I've got it like this. So we've done that in there. 7 grams of the it's fast acting dried yeast. Then we do the salt, and what we do with the salt is I put just about 2 teaspoons, maybe slightly less if you don't like it quite salty. So 2 of the teaspoons of the salt. Then with the fork's the best thing to do this. A wooden spoon does work, but it tends to get very stuck up. So we're just going to mix that, give that a good old mix together, all the dry ingredients. Then you're going to make a well in the middle, as you do when you're baking. I'm sure you know how to do these things already. Little well in the middle. And then we get, this is Tesco's finest sunflower oil. Any oil I think will do. I think there's probably some alternatives. Tablespoon. So we do 3 of these, dump these in the well. 2, that was a bit of a generous one. 3 tablespoons of oil. Then this water, 300 millilitres. It's warm. It's not really warm as such, but it's not cold. So it's sort of tepid, I think they would call that. So 300 millilitres of water. Boom. In there like that. Then we get the fork, and this is just like you're just literally bringing it together, making it into like a big lump as opposed to sort of a mixture. And it's quite, this is the messy sort of bit, and you just want it to literally, it'll just start clinging together into sort of a dusty, sticky sort of mess. But the fork definitely works. The wooden spoon is just, it all just gets a bit too stuck together. So we're going to bring that together. Now quite specifically, you've got to knead this for 10 minutes. It seems like a lot of time, and you'll get to a point halfway through where you think you've done enough. You haven't, 10 minutes. So this is what we're going to look like. It's sort of brought together in a sort of a lump, enough that you can pick it up in one go, like this. So we're going to stick the timer on 10 minutes. Then I'm going to reach into my bag of flour, chuck some of that on the side there. Then just going to dump that out. I try and just, anything that's left in there, I try, because obviously there's some yeast and salt and things in there still. It's very dusty with the flour. I tend to stick that on the top, and then what I do is I sort of pick it up from the outside and fold that stuff into the middle so that we know that we've got all the yeast in there. And then we're just going to knead it. Now my technique is to sort of pick it up from the sides and then just push down, and then push down into the middle and keep picking it up from the sides. When you start to feel a sticky bit, like my hand is sticking to this bit, I tend to just pick an extra little bit of flour up and chuck it on there. And then we're just going to keep going. And this is going to go for 10 minutes, so I'm probably going to speed this up and do sort of like a speed thing, like a fast forward vibe for about 10 minutes. But always keep everything floured, and yes, I'll see you in 10 minutes. Right, so I'm at the 5-minute mark. And this is what it's looking like now. So it's looking like it's done. Don't be fooled, it's not done. So I've gone through 3 handfuls of flour to get to this point. So you've got to put quite a lot of extra flour. But once it's at this point, don't add any more. Because if you add any more at this point, you won't get the sticking. It will sort of, you'll end up folding it and it will end up like this. So don't add any more flour, but you want to keep the surface floured, and you've got to go for another 5 minutes, because as much as you might think it's done, you've got to go for the full 10, because that's what makes it fluffy and full. Right, there we go. 10 minutes. It's like a baby's bottom. Very super smooth. It's like Play-Doh. It's really sort of soft, but it's sort of, as you pull it out, it springs back to its size. So that's absolutely perfect. So you've got to knead it for 10 minutes. People who knead it for not 10 minutes then go, oh, my bread was rubbish. So now we've got 2 options, depending on whether you want to make a bloomer or whether you want to make a loaf. So, where is the loaf tin? That's always quite handy to have these items handy and ready. There we go. Not ready, but there we go. Right, so I've got a loaf tin. This is a £2 loaf tin, I believe. It's a £2 or a £4. I think it's a £2. I can put I'll put in the description what it is. So either you could wash your bowl out that you've used previously. So you could do this if you're doing a bloomer, you do it in the bowl. If you're doing a loaf, you can do it in the loaf tin. So what you want to do is get your butter. That is Bertolli. It's not actually butter, but it's close enough. And then this is the old greasing trick. Get a bit of greaseproof paper, or just your hand if you're a savage, and get yourself a bit of butter, and then you just want to quite liberally butter the inside of the tin. This is vitally important, because otherwise you'll be desperately trying to scrape off of the inside of here. So this, I'm making a loaf in this video, but a bloomer is very, very similar. It's the same bread, it's the same technique, it's just this is in a loaf. So what we're going to do, now I've got butter on my hands and nothing to work with. So what we're going to do is, you sort of roll it, because you don't want any cracks on the top. So you sort of roll the cracks underneath and sort of smooth it out into about the sort of shape of the tin. It doesn't need to be as long, and then you can dump it in the tin like that. So this is how it's going to look in the tin. If you're doing it in the bowl, you can just roll it in a ball. And then what we want to do, get some cling film. You can do this with a damp towel, but do not do it with a dry towel, because if you do it with a dry towel, you'll dry the dough out and the yeast won't work, because you'll lose the moisture. So I'm going to do it with this piece of cling film, which happens to be the end of the roll, but it looks like there's just enough. So it's going to wrap the top in cling film. Same applies if you're doing it in the bowl. You can do it in the bowl, just right around the top. And you don't want to do it tight. You don't want it like a banjo string, but you want to be, just on there. Wrap underneath, so we don't want any air or moisture escaping from there. And then I'm going to go put this in the airing cupboard. It's supposed to just go somewhere warm for an hour. So I don't know how warm it needs to be, but the airing cupboard works for me. I think you could probably just leave it out on the side on a warm day, or put it under your jumper. I don't know, whatever you want. So I'm going to go put this in the airing cupboard. So you'll either have something that looks like this, or something that looks similar to that, but in a bowl. And put a timer on for an hour, which I'm going to do right now. And then I'll see you then. So with movie magic, no time has passed. I thought while I had all the stuff out, I would make a second loaf and I'd make a bloomer, just because I kept saying the word bloomer. So this is the bowl that we discussed a minute ago. That's our second dough that I've just made. Same as the first one, nice and smooth. And then I ran out of cling film on the last one, so I found this clear bag. The fact that it's clear doesn't mean anything, but what I am going to do is I'm going to stick that over the top, and then I'm going to find a bit of something, probably a bit of tape or something like that. You don't need to watch me do that. You can watch. You can wait. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to stick a bit of tape around that just to kind of keep it in, because obviously there's no clinginess to it. And then I'm going to stick that in for an hour, and then we'll come back and review it. Right, so here we are, 1 hour later. So this is now what our bread looks like. So it's filled up all that space, and you've now nice and tight against the top. So, oh, that's the alarm saying that it's been 1 hour. So this is the sort of the satisfying bit. So we're going to peel the cling film off like that. What we're going to do is we're going to just chuck a bit more of the flour, not a huge amount this time, just a little bit, and chuck it on there. What we're going to do is we're going to peel this out, and you'll see it's gone all bubbly underneath, so it should be a little bit warm as well. So what we're going to do, we're going to squish all the air out of it, and just give it, you're not going to knead it hard, but we're just going to give it a few little squishes. Squishes definitely just need to beat all the air out of it. And then, similar technique to before, what we do, because this is how we don't want a cracked crust, so we don't want this on the top, you see. So what we do is we squish it out, fold the edges in, wait a minute, and then we roll it back on itself. So the top of the bread, we want with a nice smooth top, so you don't crack the, don't get cracks on the crust of the bread. So we're going to do it roughly into the shape of this. We're just going to get our butter back again. You might, if it has stuck, sometimes it sticks a little bit. If it has stuck, you might just need to give it a little rinse out, but this hasn't. So what we're going to do is we're just going to put a bit more grease in there, make sure it's nice and greasy, because you don't want it sticking. It's a real pain in the arse if it sticks later. So we're going to just make sure, look, we've got all our air out, so we've squished it back small again. We're going to chuck it back in the tin. It will be a little bit bigger than it was when we first put it in there, but it's definitely got all the air out of it, squished it. Then we're going to put the cling film back over the top, and then we're going to put our timer on for another 1 hour. This time we're not going to put it in the airing cupboard. We're just going to leave it on the side, sort of ambient temperature. So all we've done is given it a little bit of a knead. We've squished all the air out of it, folded it back over on itself, and then stuck it there because we want the crust to be nice and smooth. And it's going to rise again, hopefully, and then we'll put it in the oven. I'm going to come back in another 15 minutes, my time, and probably about 2 or 3 seconds your time, and we'll make the bloomer, and we'll see how that goes. Right, we're back again. This is the bloomer time. So what we're going to do is we're going to remove, oh, this is the problem. I put the tape on this, there we go, right, untape. This one's actually even more satisfying because it sort of fills the bowl up and gets all very bulbous and sort of puffy, which I quite like that. Something weirdly satisfying about that. So what we're going to do, same deal as before, really. So tiny bit of flour. We're just going to grab the whole thing out in a big lump. You see all the poofiness, you're going to squish all that air out. We're just going to give it a little knead, not a lot. We don't want to get a lot of flour on this, we just want to stop it from sticking to the edges. But the main thing is to get that air out. So give it a couple of kneads, a few little turns. Right, exactly the same crack as before. We sort of roll the split bits in, and we want to give ourselves a nice sort of even shape. If we, at this point, if we have it very fat on one end and very skinny the other end, you end up with a really funny shaped loaf. So the trick is like that thing. So I stretched it out, and then rolled it under each side, backwards and forwards. So you end up with a nice sort of flat, small shape like that. And then what we're going to do is we're going to get a baking tray with just a piece of non-stick baking parchment, or whatever you call it. We're going to just dump that right there in the middle. This is one of those situations where, if you earlier, with my earlier advice, used a wet tea towel over the top of here, this is the perfect situation for your wet tea towel. You can chuck that back over. I'm not going to use a wet tea towel because I hate the idea of making a wet tea towel and having a wet tea towel hanging around. So I'm going to use my bag again. You can sort of get away with the cling film again, but the main thing is just to kind of cover. So I'm just going to stick my bag back over the top and maybe chuck something on either end to just weigh it down a little bit. And we're going to do exactly the same as before, same crack. We're just going to leave it here for another hour, just in the air to rise a little bit more. Proving, I think this is called. Yes. In absolutely no time at all, you'll see us putting it in the oven, hopefully. Well, doesn't time fly when you're having fun? So we've done our wait another hour. So we've got huge chunks of bread now. So that's our bloomer, and that's our loaf. So as you can see, we've risen up again. I've just peeled the cling film off there, so we've got a big old chunk of that. This is what the kids nowadays call a chungus. So what we've done is we've preset our oven. We've had this heating up for about 10 minutes. We're on 200 because this is a fan oven, but what you'll find is that if you haven't got a fan oven, you might need to go up a little bit higher. So the reason you start off high is because we want a nice crusty crust. And if you go for it, a lot of people will tell you to go on a medium setting and leave it for a length of time. But what we're going to do is we're going to stick it in for 20 minutes on this setting here, on 200, and then in 20 minutes time we're going to reduce the heat to 180 for another 15 minutes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop these both in the oven. Hopefully they'll fit in there side by side so we can cook them at the same time. And then in about another 20 minutes I'll come and grab you, and then we can turn it down a little bit and see how we're getting on. Cool, right, here we are. 20 minutes later, we're going to reduce the temperature to 180, and then we're going to set our timer to another 15 minutes. This works really well on my oven. Your oven might work differently. Oh, it's exciting time! So, we're ready to remove the bread from the oven. So we've done our 15 minutes is up, oven's off. Let's see how we're looking. So, number one, we have a loaf here, looking very good. You should tap it and it should sound hollow. That's how you know it's ready. This might, oh, there we go, look, I've done it well because it lifts straight out. Oh, plonk it down there. That is all to do with the greasing. Sometimes it will stick and sometimes you have to use a spatula or something to get it out. So there we go, that's our loaf there, completed, looking very good. There's a few little holes in the top, but that's pretty good looking loaf. And here we go for the bloomer. As you can see, so this is the same quantity of bread. Okay, so you can see as that's restricted by the tin, you do actually get slightly more bread with the bloomer, but obviously when you cut it, it's just, you know, it depends whether you want slices or sandwiches or whatever else. So there we go, that's our bread sorted. So you want to take it straight off the tray or out of the tin and stick it on the cooling rack, because otherwise it might get a bit funny and stuck in the tin. And you just want to leave that to cool, and there we go, ready to go, bread sorted. So just a quick word on the yeast. There's a couple of different ways with the yeast. So this is like a one you mix with water. So if you read the instructions on the back, you just dissolve 1 teaspoon of this with 1 teaspoon of sugar with some 150 millilitres of water, 15 grams of this yeast, and then you leave it in a warm place, and it's a bit of a process involved. It does the same job But whatever yeast you buy, it will come with some instructions that will sort of say this is the equivalent of this. You can also make your own yeast with some potatoes and you feed it sugar, or if you Google that on the internet, there's lots of different things. But anyway, either way, for the basics of it, there's some bread. This one, ordinarily when I try and make a bloomer, I may try and make it a little bit longer, but that one's obviously done in a bit of a rush. But there we go, bread sorted. How easy is that?